Do you believe that only citizens of the United States should be able to vote in federal elections?
We don't have a position about non-citizens voting in federal elections.
That's a decision of the state law.
Do you believe that people registering to vote should provide documentary proof of their citizenship?
Documentary proof of citizenship requirements are often discriminatory.
I have a lot of power now because I'm effectively...
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Do you think that the 2020 presidential election was rigged? So what's your answer?
I just gave you an answer.
You know what? I don't understand a word you said.
I was shocked at how political it is.
Yeah, well, I guess we shouldn't be.
The kicker line was, don't give your information to the man.
Young black Americans, 47%, neither current name or address, 30% no license at all. The bigotry of low expectations.
Do you believe that only citizens of the United States should be able to vote in federal elections?
We don't have a position about non-citizens voting in federal elections. We believe that's what the current laws are, and so we're certainly fighting for everyone who's eligible under the current laws to be able to vote.
Ms. Riordan?
I do not believe that non-citizens should be able to vote in federal elections.
Ms. Camarillo?
That's a decision of the state law, but I want to emphasize
it's a decision
that
of state law as to who should vote in federal elections?
States decide who gets to vote in various elections. And in federal elections, I believe that we should be encouraging people to naturalize and then vote.
Okay, but you're saying that the federal government should have no say in who votes in a federal election?
I don't have a position on that.
Mr. von Spakovsky?
As a first-generation son of naturalized citizens, I believe only citizens should be allowed to vote in all U.S. elections.
Ms. Lakin?
Federal law prohibits non-citizens from voting in federal elections, and we support, our work focuses on enabling all eligible voters to be able to vote and cast their ballot and have that ballot counted.
Okay. Do you believe that people registering to vote should provide documentary proof of their citizenship in order to register to vote? Mr. Hewitt?
I think your first question kind of answers the second. Based upon the applicable rules, federal or state elections, or what have you, we know we have to follow those rules. The question is, what's the impact of those rules?
Ms. Riordan?
Yes.
Ms. Camarillo?
Voter registration cards and affidavits, when people sign them, people are signing under federal, penalties of certain, depending on the state, either criminal or otherwise.
Yeah.
That they're.
Can I get a yes or no out of you? Should they or should they not have to require documentation establishing their citizenship?
It's already redundant in many states, and it's already being asked.
Mr. von Spakovsky?
Yes, all individuals should be required to provide proof of citizenship.
Ms. Lakin?
Documentary proof of citizenship requirements are often discriminatory. In fact, we sued the state of Kansas and won litigation on this issue.
Okay. I do find it troubling that these couldn't both all be answered with a simple yes. I think if you asked most Americans, the overwhelming majority of Americans would say, yeah, you should have to be a citizen to vote in a federal election, and yeah, you ought to be required to prove it. You have to show identification papers when you board an airplane, unless you're an illegal alien, of course, but that's a different question. To go to the doctor in many instances, to pick up a prescription in many instances. All kinds of things require identification. Why not voting? Now, the Carter-Baker report from 2008, keep in mind that the Carter and Carter-Baker, as former President Jimmy Carter, recommended that states require voters to use a Real ID compliant identification to, quote, ensure that persons presenting themselves at the polling places are, in fact, the ones on the registration list. And I agree with former President Carter on that. And to that end, I've authored legislation that would allow states to enforce such identification laws, which are so popular among Americans, and with good reason. The legislation, as compared to the likely unconstitutional John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, would respect the boundaries of federalism. And that's important always that we do that, in that that's one of our twin structural safeguards in the Constitution. Mr. von Spakovsky, in your experience, would more robust voter ID laws disenfranchise legal voters?
The answer to that is no, and that's not my opinion. That's based on turnout data that we now have for more than 15 years. Election after election after election. Georgia, for example, ID law has been in place since the 2008 election. They've seen record registration and turnout of all voters, including Black and Hispanic voters there. And all the studies, one of the ones I cited, showed that when you compare all 50 states, IDs do not keep people from voting, particularly because every state that's put in an ID requirement will provide a free ID to anyone who doesn't have one.
I am introducing today legislation called the Right to Vote Act. And this bill would empower voters to challenge in court any action taken by a state or local government that makes it harder to vote, and force that state or that locality to demonstrate that the restrictions serve some governmental purpose and are the least restrictive means of doing so.
And I also want to just take note that I have a lot of power now because I'm effectively,
Yes, you do.
yes, thank you. I'm effectively the acting chair.
Senator Booker, if you and I had all the power we needed, we would straighten out this NCAA NIL mess.
Amen. Hallelujah.
As well as a bunch of other things. Talk a little bit about how Tennessee is ranked #1 when you look at election integrity and safe elections, and then talk about the need for a photo ID.
Let me take the second one first.
Sure.
Look, I just don't know why we're even still arguing about ID requirements. Like I said, they've been in place in many states since the 2008 election. All the studies show that not only did registration turnout not go down in those states, it increased. Georgia, one of the first states to put it in, has had record turnout. And like I said, that one of the reasons is everybody's talking about, oh, people can't get an ID. Every state has put in a free ID for anyone who doesn't already have one, but Americans overwhelmingly have ID. So it's just not an issue. And the polling, look, Americans disagree a lot of stuff. But one thing they agree on, and this has stayed consistent over the past decade, is it doesn't matter whether you're Black or white, Hispanic, Asian, or whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, overwhelmingly Americans say ID is a common sense requirement because they have to do it every day.
And if I can interject right here,
Yeah.
not only do Americans overwhelmingly support that, then Justice Stevens wrote in the Crawford case supporting
Right.
photo ID.
Yeah, he wrote the majority opinion upholding the constitutionality of it. By the way, that was over Indiana's voter ID law, and with the new law in place in 2008, Barack Obama won the state of Indiana, the first Democrat to win it, I think, since the 1960s. On integrity in general in Tennessee, in 2021, the Heritage Foundation, where I work, premiered a election integrity scorecard. We came up with almost 50 different criteria, best practices recommendations on how states should handle their elections. And it covers everything from making sure you have accurate voter registration lists to making sure you have full transparency so that observers of all the parties can watch what's going on. And then we rated each state according to their rules and regulations in place. And we continually update it. I think Tennessee now is at the top of our rankings because they've made a whole series of changes to improve the security of the election process.
Mr. Van Spakovsky, do you think that the 2020 presidential election was rigged?
Senator, that election's over with. There were no cases proven in court to show that it should be overturned, as happened in for example, the 2018 congressional race, the Ninth Circuit. So what we should be doing is looking forward to try to fix the vulnerabilities that we do know exist in the system.
So what's your answer?
I just gave you an answer. Joe Biden is the president. He was certified as the president. There were no cases in court proven to show that there the kind of fraud that would have overturned the election. That's the way that, as you know, it works. In the Ninth,
so
in the Ninth Circuit in North Carolina, that happened.
So the 2020 election was not rigged.
Was what?
Not rigged.
I've given you my answer on this, Senator.
You know what? I don't understand a word you said. Seriously, this is for most folks.
I'll be
yes or
happy
no.
to explain. If you have a case in which you believe that an election was wrongly decided, as happened in the 9th Congressional District,
I don't have much time.
You go to court and you prove your case. That didn't happen in the 2020 election.
So do you believe that a lot of those legal challenges, I guess only one was upheld, that it was proper decision by the court to throw all those challenges out?
I don't have all those cases in front of me, and I haven't
here's
reviewed all. I
here's
haven't
what I'm
reviewed
getting
all
at.
the cases.
Here's what I'm getting at. There's a subtext here. In the subtext is whether there's going to be ongoing challenges, and there's a certain person running for president right now who's already still talking about that as being rigged. And election integrity that you're talking about includes getting rid of what has been a significant protection in Shelby County with preclearance.
Mr. Spakovsky, what would you say this legislation's about? What do you think the goal of this legislation is?
Well, bringing back preclearance is to give the very partisan bureaucrats inside the voting section where I first worked when I got to the Justice Department, basically control over state elections. And a lot of groups don't want to have to go to court like other litigants and actually prove a case, prove discrimination. They would rather be able to call their friends and former colleagues who are now working in the voting section, say, you know, we really don't like this particular bill, you should object to it. And that's the kind of thing that Ms. Riordan and I saw happening when we were there.
Ms. Riordan, you gave examples of this part of the Department of Justice being sanctioned. You know, in simple terms, it seems to be that people in this section are more on a political crusade than they are enforcing the law. Is that a fair statement?
That's definitely a fair statement. My very first day in the section, when I was being walked around and introduced, there were political, campaign type signs for the Gore-Lieberman ticket. It was in the year 2000. Obviously, infraction of the Hatch Act. When Barack Obama won the election in 2008, I come in very early in the morning. Somebody had smashed the picture of George W. Bush and taken a picture of Barack Obama out of like the newspaper and pasted it to the frame. There is, if they don't like the politics of a particular state, they target them. There were signs on doors that said "mess with Texas." It is very, very political. I was shocked at how political it is.
Yeah, well, I guess we shouldn't be. So if the data is that clear, then why are we trying to do what we're doing, Ms. Riordan?
I believe we're trying to take the states' rights from them and federalize all elections and hand a lot of those decisions to partisan bureaucrats within the Department of Justice.
I think you're right.
During the 2020 election cycle, we received through the Election Protection Coalition hotline, 866 Our Vote, calls from voters indicating that they were receiving robocalls in which there was apparently a voice actor, we later learned, who was hired to say something to the effect of, if you vote by mail, the information will be used against you to collect outstanding debt, to execute outstanding police warrants, and to force mandatory vaccinations. The kicker line was, don't give your information to the man. We traced this to a gentleman named Jacob Wool and his compatriots, who we learned on the cheap were able to send 85,000 such robocalls, and they tried to target black voters. We filed suit under Section 11B of the Voting Rights Act. These individuals were later prosecuted successfully and convicted, and we won on summary judgment, and we're going after damages from these folks as well. We represented the National Coalition on Black civic participation, which had to divert resources to address these issues and re-inform these 85,000 voters about what the law really provided. That was done on the cheap. That was in the 2020 cycle. Today, the same robocall could be done in an AI-assisted way, and it could clone the voices of people like Barack Obama or Morgan Freeman or Oprah Winfrey or anyone who's of notoriety, and people can be fooled. And so we need protection from this. We won our case because that was found to be voter intimidation, but not all mis and disinfo that's designed to chill the vote is going to rise to that level. So we need more protections.
Aren't there bills that have already been introduced that will prevent these kinds of robocalls from occurring?
There certainly are some bills introduced, which we can certainly talk about and figure how we can all rally around and support. There's also action by the executive branch, the FCC, to ban use of robocalls, at least in federal elections, AI-assisted robocalls, that is. And so when we think about how we make it easier to vote and how do we actually make it harder to stop people from voting, we have to think comprehensively in this way.
When you look at subsets affected by this, younger Americans, 41% of those between 18 and 24, currently don't have a driver's license with the current name. Young Black Americans, 47%, neither current name or address. 30% no license at all for young Black Americans. So to say this is an easy thing is not realistic. And of course, when they do the analysis, people with less education and lower annual incomes are more likely to lack a current driver's license. To say that this is somehow the bigotry of low expectations, I think, is insulting. These individuals, many of them are just living difficult lives with a lot of demands. Ms. Lakin, have you run into this in your analysis of the use of voter ID?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that question. Absolutely. And when it comes to voter ID, I would say the devil is in the details. While we all agree that elections should be safe and secure and free and fair, and that voters should be verifying that identity, the truth of the matter is that in many instances, there are voter IDs that are really difficult to comply with, and that they are adopted with discriminatory intent and with discriminatory impact. And we have seen this, for example, in the North Carolina case that we litigated in 2013, which was challenged a law that was adopted shortly after Shelby County. In that case, the state, following Shelby County, went ahead and changed the voter ID law that it was going to impose, and in doing so, dropped IDs that were disproportionately held by Black voters, and left in the bill only those voter IDs that were disproportionately held by white voters. Ultimately, the Fourth Circuit ruled that the law targeted Black voters with almost surgical precision and struck down that law as unconstitutional.
I want to talk to you about that irony. Mr. von Spakovsky, how many Colorado voters would have been disenfranchised if the Democrat Supreme Court had affirmed, if the U.S. Supreme Court had affirmed the Democrat Colorado Supreme Court?
4.5 million registered voters.
Does disenfranchising 4.5 million voters, is that enhancing democracy?
No.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out in support of democracy and against disenfranchising millions of people in Colorado?
I am not.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out against disenfranchising voters in the state of Maine?
I am not, and that would have been 1 million registered voters.
Are you aware of any major Democrats who spoke out against disenfranchising voters in the state of Illinois, which is the home state of the chairman of this committee?
I am not.
And that was one lone district judge who said, nope, the people of Illinois don't get to vote for the Republican nominee for president. Mr. Van Spakovsky, you wrote a November 2023 report with 2 important findings utilizing 2016 and 2020 Census Bureau data. What were your conclusions regarding the 9 formerly covered states under Section 5?
That they had registration rates and turnout rates close to the national registration turnout rate or above it. And in fact...
And how did they compare to New York and California?
Yeah, well, they all did better than New York and California, including the turnout of registration turnout, not just of all voters, but registration turnout of black voters.
Thank you.